Hey, I'm Chris Lamm. This episode is going to be so good. I'm going to be sitting down with my good friend Faith Barrett, who is part of the Barrett team. They're a real estate team in Redding, California, but there's so much more than that. She's a very inspiring lady. I'm so excited. I've been excited to have this podcast for a long time. So do me a favor, please make sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. It really helps us get more exposure to this podcast. And without further ado, Faith Barrett. Faith, thanks for being with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for sending the Calendly invite eventually. No, just kidding.
Oh, did I not send it?
No, I'm just messing with you.
Well, we're still figuring out what we're doing. So, but Faith, I've been so excited to have you here. You know, you and I started hanging out a little bit a couple years ago, and a couple things that, you know, caught me off guard when I met you. Number one, you were so willing to help me out. Like, we didn't really have a relationship at all. And, you know, honestly, I tell you all the time, I wasn't involved in content creation, and you were doing really well with it at the time, and you had no reason to help me. And so, you know, just first of all, I just want to say thank you for that, because you're really the catalyst that got me started in this, and part of the reason why we're here today. But the second thing was your work ethic. It impresses me. You know, there's a lot of people in our industry, I would say in every industry, and I always respect people that work really, really hard and take really good care of their people. And that's why you're here. I mean, there's 1,000 realtors out there, and the people that I try to interview are people who I think have something to say. Not that everyone doesn't, but you know, your work ethic and what you've done in a short period of time is something that I thought would be useful to talk about. So one of the questions I like to ask people, because I don't know your history. We talked a little bit about this today.
Glad we fleshed it out.
What was so the Money Hole podcast, we came up with the name because people right now, especially, they struggle with money. And a lot of people, they want to have balance in their life. They want to have the house, the spouse, the kids, and go on some trips. But a lot of people struggle, and they do for a long time. And so one of the things that I've learned over 22 years of doing mortgages, and certainly as part of my story, is people have a lot of weird belief systems around money. You know, they either think it's the end all of happiness, or they think it's evil to have money. And so I want to know, you know, at a young age for you, like, what were your belief systems around money?
Yeah. So growing up, I grew up in a very conservative Christian home. My parents raised us really to the mindset of like, save for a rainy day. My dad never really invested into real estate. So this is kind of like a new adventure being in the real estate world, just because Dylan, my husband, his parents were all into the rental market of fixing, flipping, and everything like that. So growing up, it was always save for a rainy day, be conservative with your funds, invest into some stock portfolio, which I didn't do as a kid. My dad did. And basically live off of your means, but don't overspend. So my parents are very, like, if anybody knows my parents, they are the most simple, but the most generous people you will meet in your day. And I don't know, my mom will have like the same sponge like 5 years ago, and she's like, it just works fine. You know, she just has that mindset. I have a very similar mindset. Like if it isn't, you know, broke, you know, you don't fix it kind of thing. And just kind of being more conservative with funds. So with that mindset, I really see money as like, it's a need to provide for, you know, your family, you know, career, to build wealth and to establish something. But at the end of the day, like, it's not our money. Like, we always would tithe as kids. Like, we always would have to give 10% back. And so that was just the mindset of that it's never ours. And so it's always, if you can operate in a mindset of generosity, like the concern of where's my next paycheck coming from won't even like cross your mind. So, although I'm conservative with our funds and everything, we still have been given an opportunity through our business to be generous with it. And I think that's just where I love to live in that mindset.
Yeah.
So
I was talking with a friend of mine a few months ago, and when I met him, he had a net worth of 5 million, and it just reached like 105 a couple of weeks ago. And he was telling a few of us, he said, you know, when things changed for me, and we said, what? And he said, when I started becoming generous. He's like, when I started giving money away, he said, he said, I don't know what it does, but it just changes everything. Now, that's not to say that if someone does that, they're going to all of a sudden get wealthy.
Right.
But oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
you become more magnetic.
Yeah.
And you lose the fear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by being generous and sowing into meaningful causes, it just opens doors.
Right.
Don't you see that?
Yeah. And I would definitely say, like, if you see generosity in that light and you see money associated with that, then giving, maybe more than you would, or that nudge or that tug you feel is less of what's in my bank account and more of like, okay, I just know like this is like what I'm supposed to do. So I know like with the market and everything, things have changed so drastically for a lot of realtors and everything like that. And I just have been really operating in the mindset of like, at the end of the day, like, one, this has always been like all the glory to the Lord for wherever we get and how far we go. But for our money and where we are, like, I never want to stop not being generous just because funds are tight. You can give generously differently. Like, you can be generous with your time with people and mentoring. Like, it doesn't have to be financial and it doesn't have to be money. So I think sometimes people get tripped up with like, well, I want to be generous. Well, you can be generous with like a volunteer service. That's the same way for me, like with how limited time we have, with how busy we are, finances, like we're able to give and, run with that. So,
yeah. And the truth is most people can be generous. There are ways to do it. For you and I right now, our time would cost us more than a paycheck. So giving our time is hard to do.
Yeah.
I wrote this tweet the other day about generosity, and I basically was saying how, being generous is not to receive something. It's literally for the joy of being generous. But what happens when people are generous is it changes the way you think. And when your thoughts change, your behavior changes, and that's what actually ends up changing your results.
Right.
So if you really think about someone who becomes generous, the reason why I believe that they seemingly become more blessed, it's not because a paycheck just shows up in the mail. It's because their whole operating system and how they think about money, possessions, and people changes, and that is what gets different results for them. I believe so. Well, let's talk a little bit about real estate. So you talked about growing up conservatively, and then Dylan's family had a completely different way that they did things. Is that where, when you got married to Dylan, was that sort of where your mind was open to investments, cash flow, real estate?
Yeah. So when we got married, I was in nursing school. And then I finished nursing school. I was a nurse for about 5 years, started real estate within those 5 years. So I was doing real estate and nursing. And Dylan was, at the time, we thought we were going to open up a Dutch Bros, and we were going to run that. But the locations coming up just wasn't something that we felt was going to be conducive for a longevity standpoint. So we nixed that idea. And then we got into real estate. He was in the mindset of commercial. He loves numbers. Because his family lost, unfortunately, a lot in the crash, it's always been a very, how can I take that same like passion and desire for real estate, but, maybe come with a more cautious approach because of like things that happened that nobody could predict or see or how it was going to go. So he kind of really more introduced the real estate, got into real estate. And I was like, oh, wow, like that looks fun. Like, I love like the solution. I love the problem solving. Like, I was like, I think we should do residential too. And so Dylan was like, I'm black and white. I like numbers. And I was like, I like emotion. So let's help with real estate residential. And he's like, you can do people, I'll do business. And then just naturally, our market is more real estate prone or residential prone than commercial. So we kind of just merged over. And in that, it started getting our wheels turning of like, hey, like, could we conservatively start thinking bigger and building a portfolio. And Dylan is the numbers guy. Like, he can see numbers. He loves and obsesses over numbers. So he still invests in like the traditional stocks and everything like that. Yeah. So we're diverse in that way, but we started seeing opportunity in real estate. And then we bought our first rental property probably 3 years ago. I was trying to think about it on the way over, like 3 years ago. And then we just have kind of slowly started building. So
yeah, good for you guys. I've been doing this for 22 years, and I've seen so many real estate professionals who have helped their clients build wealth, but they never did it for themselves. And so when I see people like you guys, doing the research and taking chances, it's I know you guys are going to do really well.
Yeah.
And I think that's something about our industry that I wish was better, is that people understood, like, you're going to have these years where you do really well. there's gonna be some tough years.
Yeah.
But when you do that, you want to try to control your spending and capture that extra income and put it into cash flowing assets, and so that you don't have to do it at this level forever unless you want to, but it gives you the options, so good for you guys for doing that. So one of the things that I was excited to talk to you about, we're both in the industry and it's 2023. And, the media in 2022 said that the housing market was going to crash, and a lot of people got really nervous about the idea of buying a home. Rates are higher. Affordability is putting pressure on people. I thought it would be a good idea for us to talk about the reality of what we're seeing with buying a home, the benefits, and really try to coach people and help give them good advice on how to make the best decision or whether they should wait. So I think I'd love to know from you, if someone is thinking about buying a house right now and they're renting, what would be some of the things that you would tell them they should do to help them alleviate the fear and to make a good, intelligent decision for their family?
Yeah. So I actually met with this lady a couple of days ago, and she sat down and she said, I'd love to own a house. It's like a pride, for being a single mom to have like this, I bought something for my daughter. However, like I'm most comfortable here and I can't get here. And I'm like, well, where's your debt at? And I think a lot of people see like interest rates and the affordability of the market, and they say, there's no way I'll be able to afford that. And for us, like how we've always approached real estate is like real estate and investing is number one for us. And so it's like, if you can eliminate your useless debt to see a better return of investment in an asset like a house, and you can, cut back on your car payments, pay off your credit cards. Like I'm always first about, can you get yourself out of debt so that you can actually see the asset wealth of buying in real estate? If you're stuck in debt, that's your first hurdle to come over. If it's just a fear of I don't have debt and I'm now trying to figure out how I'm going to see the opportunity, then I sit down and I say, well, what's your long-term plan? Is this to flip? Is this to build into a rental portfolio? If I could do it all over again, I wish we didn't buy such a nice house when we first bought. We weren't into real estate at the time. And I was like, I want a new construction house. I want something nice. And the problem with that route is that I was never able to do the house hacking advice that I tell a lot of my clients, like, hey, get into a house. Don't buy the nicest house in the beginning and then, live in that for a year, turn it into a rental and move it on to the next one. My problem is I bought a really nice house at the time. I mean, it's just a new construction house, but it was very comfortable. And I was like, there is no way we are moving. And so I always try to reverse do it in my head to my clients. So I always first talk about debt because I don't want to ever set somebody up for success where they are living paycheck to paycheck, can't make their mortgage, because that's just not good advice. And then kind of just then play out what's the long-term goal of real estate for you. And then if I can share any advice, I think sometimes people who sit in front of us who are like similar age of us or are maybe like age of you and haven't even been renting their whole life and now are finally first buying, I always try to show the hope of hey, this is where we started. This is what we've slowly gone. There's not a race to you have to have 10 doors by the end of the year. Even if you get one, then you move on to the next one.
Yep.
I'm we're totally the turtle wins the race. Some people are trust fund babies and they just get all this cash and they just and it can get overwhelming to then be well, I don't have the means and I can't do it. And I'm just hey, let's figure out what the goal is for you first to execute that better.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people in this industry are going to win this year, even with it being hard, because what I hear you saying is you're an advisor to your clients. And I tell people all the time when they sit down with me, you think you came here to find out about a mortgage and to buy a house. I said, but what you're really trying to do is put your family in the best possible position. And buying a house is a part of that, right?
Right.
But when you start getting into people's debt, when you start asking them personal questions, you're crossing a line that some people are afraid to cross, but it's so worth it because that's what people need. I mean, I can't tell you the last time I sat down with someone that actually knew the tax benefits, the appreciation rate, the inflation of rents, and was making a financial decision to buy a house. It's usually because of the pressure of where they live, or it's because of the emotional part of the idea of having a house and, house hacking, because it's such a buzzword right now.
Right.
And so that's really good that you do that. So I was sitting down with a guy recently, and they said, we don't want to be house rich and cash poor. You ever heard that term before?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started talking with him and I just said, well, let's break that down, because right now you're renting. You guys could easily afford a property. But if we look at your finances, you're spending money on going out to dinner 4 times a week, buying coffees, and going on these really expensive trips. Like, I don't know if you would be poor if you bought a house. In fact, it's possible that you'd be better off, because buying a house sometimes is forced savings. It's going to force you to cook at home and to start being a little bit more creative with how you're spending money, because this particular family, they had money. They just were spending it and they didn't know where they were spending it. And they had this belief system that buying a house equals we're going to be poor. And the reality was that the way that they were living was how you end up poor. So what are your thoughts towards someone that has that mentality? Because most people right now, when they look at a mortgage payment, it's higher than they want to pay. Homes are expensive, rates are higher. And for a lot of people, they do have a lifestyle that they think they like. And that buzzword, house rich, cash poor, comes up a lot.
Yeah, I think it's just understanding the bigger picture of it, because like I look at our house, we bought our house back in 2019, I think. I can't remember now. 2018. And we bought it for 306. I know everybody's like, oh my gosh. But we thought we were buying at like the peak of the market. Our interest rate was 5%. And we went from a rental of 350. Yes, there is a rental complex here that you can get that cheap. And we went to an $1,800 mortgage payment. And Dylan thought he was going to throw up. And I relatively thought we were going to die.
It's like a 5,000% increase in your housing expense.
So we were very unrealistic renters that went to a normal, mortgage or whatever. So for us, like, okay, you get over the hurdle of it. We could afford it. We had the income to do it. And so now I look back on it. We still are living in the same house. And now my house has appreciated to like 450,000. I mean, it's fluctuated as the market's gone, but I can say that for me, like I can look at my house and I see it as a dollar sign and a paycheck if I had to cash out or I had to tap into it. And I think some people get stuck that because they tangibly can't see a dollar sign in their bank account with holding on to their house, like they would rather tangibly hold on to that dollar sign in their, account so they can say, all right, I have 100,000, but I don't want to have that $100,000 into my house. So for me, I kind of leverage it both ways and seeing it visually like a house as like my own personal bank account that nobody can touch except for me if I was to cash out, sell it, or, pull equity off of it. So I think for people, they just need to kind of see the actual better asset holding and value that our house has been able to do, whether the market has gone up, down, left, sideways. Like I still have a roof over my head. I'm still at a fixed cost and it's still appreciating, whether I lost $25,000 last year because the market, changed, or I'm gaining it back. To me, it's a long-term goal.
Yeah.
So
helping people see the truth.
Yeah.
Right. Because if people put money in their bank account, like a lot of people have kept money in cash this year because they were afraid of buying real estate or buying stocks because of the turbulence in our economy, the presidential election coming up. And what I was thinking about the other day is like, and then other people are thinking, what if the dollar crashes? Like, well, if you put money in the bank because of inflation, your 100,000 is now worth a lot less,
right? Because
of your purchase power. So at least with real estate, you're getting into an asset that's keeping pace with inflation. In most years, it outpaces inflation. So I think for you and I and people that are in the real estate industry, the number one thing that we can do right now is to educate everyday people who this isn't their world and help them understand the benefits, the true risk, and then manage their fear, because it's a scary thing right now when you have the media and their neighbors and their coworkers saying that, the housing market's going to crash, risky. It's like, well, no, it's actually risky to rent. Rents go up at 8% a year. Imagine your rent today, 9 years from now being double. And if it's hard to imagine that, ask yourself what you were paying in rent 9 years ago, and then you can kind of see how this plays out. Well, don't ask Faith. She was obviously living in Africa in the ghetto somewhere. So you don't want to live there. It's a very dangerous place to live. Okay. So, all right. So what about investors? Right now I'm looking at a couple different investment opportunities. I'm in contract on a commercial piece, and I was talking to a guy today who is actually a mutual client of ours and a good friend of mine. And I was just telling him, I said, listen, these numbers don't work right now. Like the cost of money is high. and rents are generally low. Like the model, it's pretty broken. And yet there's still people going out there and buying investment properties, and I'm doing it myself, and I know you guys are too. So what would you say to people who they've got a house, they've got some money, and they know that real estate is something that they want to get into, but they've ran the numbers, they're nervous about it. What would you say to that person?
I would say, like, is there any way, so like we're really into like building in-law units right now. So is there any way that you can maximize your current property to leverage an additional dwelling on it? If you can't because the lot size isn't available or you don't have the means to do that, then I'm always looking at, I'm a watch and wait kind of person. Save for that time that when that deal does come, because they do come, like we're getting creative, like we're finding land and we're building. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that say, oh, well, building costs are so all over the place. And right now building costs have come down. It fluctuates in variances, but we are partnered up with a great contractor. It's not any buddy deal or anything like that. I mean, we're paying his price, and we're just finding new ways to create avenues that I think a lot of people aren't seeing. And so where I can find like an opportunity, whether it's bare land and build a new construction house or two houses on it, now I'm creating my two streams of income. So we kind of, for my investing world, or I should say more Dylan, what he's built, because I'm just following along like it's my plan all along. For Dylan's great masterpiece, we have really found our niche. And I think for the investing world, if you're trying to get into it, like brainstorm with a bunch of people, like what they're doing, because I think it gets really overwhelming to just invest. And everybody's just like, well, that doesn't pencil out. That doesn't pencil out. This doesn't pencil out. And so I'm like, okay, well then wait to know what you want and then jump on it when it comes available. And if it's buildings, if it's businesses, if it's multifamilies, if it's ADUs, if it's, storage units, you name it, going outside of the area. Like I've heard like different people going outside the area. We just have kind of like our certain like thresholds of things that have to check the box. And we've gotten really hyper focused. And that's just helped us kind of denoise just opportunities that people are like, what about this opportunity? I'm like, nope, it's not in our category. Like, we're not interested right now. To kind of keep motoring on to like, what is our end goal?
Yeah. That's really good. Yeah. I think the ADU thing is something that most people are missing. And the reason I believe that is because I coach mortgage professionals all over the nation, and in a few states that are similar to California, like Washington, who are a few years ahead of us, people are doing really well with ADUs. And the way that some of the legislation works, depending on the size of your lot, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you can actually build up to 2 ADUs on one lot. And one of them, I believe, with some legislation that passed not too long ago, can actually be a 2-unit. Now you have to have the right size lot. They have to have the right offset from the street. And there are some requirements, but because of this being a piece of legislation to promote fair housing and affordable housing, you bypass a lot of the municipalities and impact fees, which reduces the cost to do it. And a lot of people, like you said, that are hearing this are probably, well, that's great. I don't have the money. I don't have the equity. I don't know how to do that. Well, that's where you have to think creatively. And someone like Faith, myself, or anyone who is making big moves, you need to call them and ask them. Like most of the people that are giving advice are people that aren't doing anything and haven't done it. And so, you got to find someone who's done these things and ask them to help show you how to do it. I was talking to a guy today, and he said, the way that I can do this is I can offer an equity share to a private money lender. And I was like, that's a pretty good idea. So you're telling me that you have a property that would be prime for building ADUs, but you don't know how to get the capital to build them, and you don't have the equity to do it, but you would be willing to let someone come in, finance your ADUs, and they could own a portion of the equity. And he said, yeah. And I said, man, that is a great idea. In fact, I might be willing to do that for you, but you got to be willing to think outside the box. And I think that's what you're saying is, when the narrative is that there is no way to make things work, I promise you there are people out there making money.
Yeah. And I think it also comes down to who are you connected with, or how are you, getting connected with other people. Like we just gosh, it was probably about 3 or 4 months ago. We took a risk. We bought a property with a tenant still in place, a very complicated tenant, that it was like, hey, if you give me X and you take care of the tenant, the property's yours and I don't care. Like, and it's a really great opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're in the process of evicting the tenant. We're taking the risk on. And, we got connected with, certain private money lending to be able to like carry certain costs. But I think a lot of people will see you or me and be like, oh, you must have started with a lot in your money or your bank account and able to do this. Like we literally save for everything that we've invested into.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not a trust fund baby. I don't have like, a cash cow like on the side just pumping money into me. I don't have a private money lender family and I think that's just like where I'm proud of where we've come, just because it shows you that we're slow, and I don't care. Like we're 3.5 years into this and, now we have 6 stores. And to me, like that's a steady enough movement to kind of keep going that's where I tell people it's not a race. Like whatever your end goal is, whatever your passive income dollar sign is or whatnot, like nobody's has like a time clock says that you have to have that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just you. And so I think that's where it all comes back down to who's your connections and what are you giving up personally to see the long-term goal. So Dylan and I have always had this statement, I'll keep it PG, but eat crap so you can have caviar for the rest of your life. And so we've given up certain things so that we can have the opportunity to retire when we're 50.
You can say shit, by the way.
Okay, good. Okay, so eat shit. So eat shit so you can have caviar for the rest of your life. And that's really just like our kind of, model is a lot of people feel like they have to work till they're 65. Like I want to be done in 10 years living off some passive income. So I'm not tied to an 8 to 5 job or selling houses or showing houses. Like it's possible. And so that's just where I get excited to tell people and encourage people. I started from nothing. We saved everything and we've literally put every single dollar that we have earned into our investments.
Yeah. There's no excuses.
Yeah.
Anyone can do it. No one ended up rich unless they were a trust fund baby. But most of my friends who are very wealthy, a lot of them were high school dropouts, and they had very hard lives, and no one gave them anything, and they learned skills.
Yeah.
And so that's something I tell people all the time is you have to find the people who have the skills you want to learn, and you have to ask them for help. And if they're busy, tell them. Try to appeal to their heart. A lot of those people, they do want to help you. And if they're that busy, offer them money. I just offered a guy $3,000 an hour to coach me because he's so busy, because I want what he has that much. And so finding mentors is key. And so anyways, well, I really appreciate you making time. I know people are going to get a lot out of this because there's so much noise out there right now. And you and Dylan are two that I see doing it and helping people do it. And I just can't thank you enough. I know you're a busy gal. So please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment if you enjoyed this podcast. And thanks again for being with us.